Hi, I'm Pastor Mark, and there's something that's been on my mind, something that I wanted to share with you. Actually, I talked about it a little bit on Palm Sunday, but it just didn't feel like I had shared enough, that there was more that might be helpful to you. You know, I think all of us can agree that these are very strange times that we live in. The COVID-19 virus has people on edge for lots of different reasons. But for starters, it's just not business as usual for most of us. People are working at home or they're not working at all. Our kids are not in school any longer, and we're not sure if or when any of this will return to normal. The things that usually fill our lives and give it meaning, like gathering with friends or family, or going out to a restaurant or a movie, or maybe to a festival on a weekend, or to church on Sunday or Wednesday night, have all come to a pause for a while. Trying to find items at the grocery store is sketchy at best and frustrating at worst. In fact, just going to the grocery store can make you feel like you're taking your life into your own hands. All of this has given us a feeling that many have never felt before, and that feeling is grief. And it's true whether you believe it is or not. You see, when most of us think about grief, we think about someone we love who has died and that feeling that happens afterwards. And that's true, that's grief. But grief is not only experienced because of a death. Most of the time, grief is experienced because of a loss or separation outside of a death. For instance, when a couple goes through a divorce, there's grief. Grief for the couple, grief for children if there are any, grief for family and friends. Often when someone retires after a lifetime of working at the same job in the same place with the same people, they suddenly feel an experience of grief or loss. Or maybe when someone moves, say, across the country, they experience the loss of a place that they've called their home, or maybe some friends that they had, or a community that they cared about. Those feelings are grief. In the midst of these times, we are experiencing grief for the loss of normalcy in our lives, for the routines that we probably never thought about much until they were gone. As I mentioned earlier, that can include family and friends. It can include our work or school or church. All of these are a loss, at least for a while. And so, we experience grief. Now, maybe you've heard of the stages of grief that were developed by some groundbreaking work from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross back in the 70s. Those stages are denial and bargaining and anger and depression and acceptance. We used to think that we lived out our grief through these stages and in that order. But today we understand that these stages are different for everyone. They come in no particular order. And some might experience all of them, and some might experience one or two of them as they make their way through this new and different landscape on the other side of a loss. Now, I know that some of you might be thinking, nah, that's not me, I'm fine. Okay. While others might be feeling paralyzed by what they hear in the news every day. The truth is that all of us experience grief differently as we make our way through it. And we do that differently. But here's the thing. No matter how you experience these feelings, whether subtly or acutely, there simply are no shortcuts. I mean, you can deny these feelings like they don't exist, but that doesn't make them any less true. Or you can sit and wallow in your grief, and that doesn't mean your feelings will pass any sooner. There simply are no shortcuts when it comes to grief. And the less that we deal with them, the more present they are. The only way to move through our grief is to acknowledge that these feelings are true, and then to deal with them when they arise. For instance, we might not choose to abide by the protocol that's been suggested. We might not wash our hands all the time or wear a mask when we go to the store. This is simply a denial or a rationalization of the truth. When we find the courage to acknowledge our behavior, we can change it. When we understand that to live that old way is putting ourselves and others at risk during this time of increased transference of the virus. We might get angry at someone that we normally wouldn't, or we may get angry because there are no paper towels at the grocery store. David Kessler, probably the leading expert on grief since Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, suggests that probably the best way to move through this anticipatory kind of grief is to acknowledge it and then try to find some balance. Sure, it's frustrating that there are no paper towels at the grocery store, but I can't change that, so I'll just have to wait till there is. See, life's not hopeless. When we acknowledge our grief, we can see how our anger is just an unnecessary emotion over something that we have no control over. And when we know that, our anger subsides, and we learn to, well, accept the things that we cannot change and to change the things we can. I can't change that there are no paper towels, but I can change the anger and frustration I feel because of it. You know, there's an account in the scriptures about Jesus coming to a pool at a place called Bethsaida. It was believed that when the spring stirred the water that there were healing qualities for those who got into the pool first. When Jesus arrives there, he finds a man who is lame sitting on a mat, and Jesus asks him what's going on. He tells Jesus that because of his infirmity, he can't get into the pool before others when the spring stirs the water. So Jesus asks him, "How long have you been here?" And he tells him, 34 years. 34 years. And then Jesus asks him a question that I think all of us have to ask ourselves at one time or another, and especially at times like these, when the world seems upside down and we feel the effects of grief in our life. He asks him, "Do you want to be healed?" Of course, the man says, "Yes, I do want to be healed." Jesus tells the lame man to take up his mat and walk. You are healed. Well, how about you? Do you want to be healed? Do you want to stop feeling like there's nothing you can do about your present circumstances, about the things that you have no control over? Acknowledge your feelings of grief. Name them, and when you do, you'll begin to rise up from your grief and you'll pick up your mat and walk. Walk through this time with a new awareness of where you are and what you need to do to get through the days ahead. So listen, try to keep yourself busy. Notice when you have these feelings, and then tell yourself you're going to change them, or you're not going to say anything, or you're going to try to do something that keeps you busy. Take up a hobby. And listen, find a routine. And for goodness sakes, stay at home and wash your hands. All right? Listen, that's all that was on my mind. I hope that it's helpful. God bless.